Very smart people working around the world who are working to move blockchain technology from concept to reality.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We'll call now on the Honorable the Deputy Governor to say prayers.
Good morning. Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Legislative Assembly now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth II, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially we pray for the governor of our islands, the premier, the speaker of the Legislative Assembly, the leader of the opposition, ministers of the cabinet, ex officio members, and members of the Legislative Assembly, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for in thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace now and always. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. Proceedings are resumed.
Administration of oaths or affirmations.
None.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker of messages and announcements.
We have apologies for late arrival by the member from Savannah, and we have apologies from the Honourable the Attorney General, who is not able to be present due to duties overseas.
Presentation of petitions.
None.
Mr. Speaker, I should ask under the apologies. The Constitution is very specific that this legislature is made up of 19 and 21, i.e. the Deputy Governor as ex officio member and the Attorney General as an ex officio member. And we all know the reasons why, in particular the Attorney General. It is specifically, if I may, sir, that this House is at all times with the availability of the legal advisor to government and this legislature. And I should question why, in his stead, during his absence, there isn't someone who can fill that responsibility, sir, and ensure that this House is legally convened.
Well, Honourable Member, I sense the direction of your question. The House is legally convened, with or without the legal advisor, if you want to call him that, but the Attorney General. Once we have a quorum, the House is legally convened. I would suspect that we would be able to get any legal advice we needed. However, maybe the Honourable Deputy Governor can answer that question.
Mr. Speaker, as the House may know, the Attorney General had to leave the island quite quickly. It was not a scheduled trip. It is to represent the Cayman Islands overseas on business. Unfortunately, the Acting Solicitor General, who would normally be here, was already on vacation. So both of those are not here. They're both standing by their phones should the House need any assistance, and we also have other members of the legal department that are here to assist as well. But it's unfortunate, and we apologize that the AG or the acting AG is not here.
Should the House require any advice that our lawyers on the government side, the Attorney, the Premier, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Financial Services, who are lawyers, and yourself, and myself included, any advice that we can't answer, any advice that we can't answer or the government needs and we can't answer, then the Premier and the government would make available accordingly. Next item. Understood your question, though.
Presentation of petitions?
None.
Presentation of papers and of reports. Cayman Islands Government Plan and Estimates. First supplementary plan and estimates for the financial year, 1st of January 2018 to the 31st of December 2018, to be laid on the table by the Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the first supplementary plan and estimates for the Government of the Cayman Islands for the financial year that will end on the 31st of December 2018.
So ordered. So is the Honourable Minister speaking there too?
Very briefly, Mr. Speaker, I thank you. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 67-1, the first supplementary plan and estimates document that has just been laid stand referred to the Finance Committee. As the estimates will be considered in Finance Committee at the conclusion of the second reading of the associated supplementary appropriation bill that is further down on the order paper, I only wish to make very brief remarks in respect of the document that has been tabled. Mr. Speaker, the first supplementary plan and estimates document is structured in the following way. Section A of the document shows, in respect of the specific appropriations being changed, the following information. 1, the amount of the original approved appropriation for a particular budget item. 2, the amount of the supplementary appropriation proposed for the particular budget item. And 3, the revised appropriation amount for the particular budget item. Section B of the document contains the proposed changes to the appropriation law for the financial year ending 31st of December 2018, and that law was approved by the Legislative Assembly in November 2017. And Section C of the document shows the forecast financial statements for the financial year ending 31st of December 2018. Mr. Speaker, honourable members should use the first supplementary plan and estimates as a document that provides more information to each of the items in the schedule to the supplementary appropriation bill for the 2018 financial year. That bill appears further down on today's order paper. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions to the Honourable Ministers and members of the Cabinet? Suspension of standing orders. Premier. Mr. Premier. Suspension of standing orders. 23.
Can we have the suspension?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the suspension of Standing Order 23, 7, and 8 in order that questions may be asked of ministers after the hour of 11 o'clock.
The question is, that standing orders be suspended in order for questions to be asked after the hour of 11 a.m. All in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition, the elected member for Newlands, to ask the Honourable Minister of Commerce, Plan and Infrastructure. Question number 32.
The elected member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask question number 32 in my name to the Honourable Minister of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure. Can the Honourable Minister state what road repair and improvement budget has been allocated to each constituency in the Cayman Islands for the current budget period, and what amount of these budgets have been used as of 31st of October 2018?
The Honourable Minister of Commerce.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, the answer is that the NRA segregated its 2-year budgets for district roads into essentially 2 one-year budgets. The total allocation for the fiscal year 2018 was $1.6 million, and the total allocation for 2019 is also $1.6 million. Mr. Speaker, the $1.6 million budget for 2018 was broken down by district, and the amounts allocated for each district based on the stated condition of roadway segments in the NRA's pavement management database. The amount to be spent in each district for 2018 were planned as follows: East End, $150,000, North Side, $225,000, Bordentown, $525,000, Georgetown, $300,000, West Bay, $400,000. Mr. Speaker, the NRA took the decision to start in East End and work its way west over the 2-year period, which meant that it would not likely reach Georgetown and West Bay until late 2018. Mr. Speaker, in September 2018, the NRA opted to reduce the $1.6 million proposed spend to $1.2 million in order to help fund shortfalls in its NRA 9, which is its routine maintenance vote. Mr. Speaker, the actual versus budgeted expenditure for the district roads as of September 30th is as follows. NRA 6 East End, budget $150,000. Invoice to date $278,295.53. NRA 6 North Side, budget $225,000. Invoice to date $222,447.71. NRA 6 Bordentown, budgeted $525,000. Invoice to date $546,108.19 and NRA 6 Georgetown, budgeted $300,000. Invoice to date $94,129.78. NRA 6 West Bay, budgeted $400,000. Invoice to date $12,322.20.
Honorable member, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if the minister could state if any capital allocations were made for the eastern districts for road work or repairs.
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if you'd indulge me to just confer with my staff.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We don't have that. I don't have that information with us, and I assume capital as in capital works. Yeah, I don't have that information with me. If the member wishes, we can get that information and respond to him later or in writing, either way.
Member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the minister could state whether or not he believes that the upcoming period with $1.6 million allocated to 2019 is going to be sufficient to cover the needs for road repairs throughout the eastern districts.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Based on the information I have been given, we do feel that the 1.6 is enough, and in the instances where we, like in this period where we found that we had to move some funds to deal with repairs and more urgent repairs, in particular after the rains, etc., we've had to move funds around, and we have actually, since this question came in, refunded, or we have reappropriated funds back to the district road works to continue us through to the end of the year.
Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister for that answer, and just to acknowledge that, you know, his team did a good job on the roads that they managed to approach or attack in Newlands. My follow-up question is about the roads that have now been repaired in Newlands. There's been a delay in putting back in speed bumps, and I think some of the drains and so on that may have been filled over by, I guess by mistake. Can the Minister give an update on when those things will be done? Because the issue I have in Newlands is that brand new roads, well, resurfaced roads, attract or encourage people to speed in certain areas, and that is becoming a real issue in the constituency.
The Honourable the Minister of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member for the question. Yes, we have had some delays. We have a long list of requests for calming, speed calming measures, etc. We also went back to the drawing boards on those as well, because we've had, I guess, some complaints over the type of traffic calming measures we were using, that is commonly known as speed bumps. I've been reliably informed that the NRA have now agreed on the specific type that they will use. And if the member would please just shoot me a quick email on the areas that he has concerns with, I can make sure that they are on the list.
Member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just to clarify with the Minister, are we in a substantive question and ask for the road repair and improvement? Is the government considering them one and the same, road improvement versus road repair?
Honourable the Minister of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To answer the member from East End, no, we try to keep those separate. And just as to follow on, I wanted to, the member from the Honourable Deputy Opposition Leader, there was 144,000 in hot mix reinstatement on the Seaview Road in East End that came from the NRA 14 vote.
Member for East End.
Mr. Speaker, can the Minister then tell us if this is repairs or does it also include improvements? Because that one that just spoke of, the 144, was that also repairs or improvement? Because the road in East End is what I was going to. There is a need for further improvements of the road, not repair, it's improvement.
The Honourable the Minister of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the member for the question. And the member is correct. There is sometimes we get to a road that the NRA initially go to do repairs and realize that the repairs would be senseless and actually end up doing a full improvement on the road. And realignment, etc. Yes. Member
for Georgetown Central. Unless you have a follow-up. On the member for Georgetown Central.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister say if there's any plans on repaving the Markfield Lane is still on track for the end of this year?
The Honorable Minister of Commerce.
Mr. Speaker, thank the member for the question. What we hope to achieve before the end of this year, McPhail Lane is not on that list. From an understanding that that's not the end of this year is not the end of Georgetown Works. It's what we have in the budget that we think we will complete by the end of this year. On the list to be completed under this budget by the end of the year in Georgetown Central is Avocado Lane and Grapevine Close.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So thank you to the minister for the answer. Can the minister say whether or not the NRA has plans to do the improvements that have been gazetted to widening of Markfield Lane? Because if I understand correctly, that road was gazetted a while back to be widened. Is there any plans on addressing widening of that area? And the reason why I bring it, Mr. Speaker, if you allow, yeah? Okay.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, the member, this is another case of where we had a road down the McPhail Lane down for repairs, and we have now realized that we actually need to do a full improvement on that road. And so in the next year's budget, it is scheduled for a full improvement on the road.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My second question was that whether or not that improvement will include the widening element or just resurfacing.
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I have been reliably informed that that includes widening.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition, the elected member for Newlands, to ask the Honourable Minister of District Administration, Tourism and Transport, question number 33.
The elected member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask question number 33 in my name to the Honourable Minister for Tourism. Can the Honourable Minister state what capital infrastructure projects have been identified to date in the Eastern Districts, that is Bordentown, East End, and North Side, which are considered necessary for government to fully implement its National Tourism Plan, and what are the required completion times and estimated costs?
The Honorable the Deputy Premier and Minister of Tourism and Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for the question. The answer is the following projects have been identified by the government for the Eastern Districts. In Bordentown, the minister that spoke before me has looked over some of the capital works that will be needed for the new Mandarin project there. The Pedro St. James has a capital project which improves the restaurant that is on site. And I can also say that the tours have increased over 2017 by over 5%. And this is, the updating of the restaurant was March 2019, and the capital expense was $10,000. Mr. Speaker, I capture East End and North Side together with the Botanic Park, one of the most exciting projects, the Children's Garden, which will be accessible close to both areas, the increase in tours for 2019, they have increased by 15% over 2017. The Children's Garden, Mr. Speaker, is $1,200,000 in a capital project. The wreck of the 10 sales, signage, and welcome comfort center, June 2019, CI dollars $85,000. North Side, Starfish Point, Comfort Center, June 2019, $99,000 CI. Yeah. For all areas above, we have been utilizing the Department of Tourism to assist with the marketing, assisting with Airbnb rentals, and offering IT support for businesses that request assistance. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that the National Tourism Plan is a fluid plan, and therefore my ministry and the Department of Tourism will always be identifying items and moving the plan forward with action on those items. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a follow-up. In relation to the Heritage House and the Nurse Joseph Center there in Gun Square, I noticed the minister didn't mention that one, but I know we'd met there and he'd promised some assistance, so maybe he could give us an update on that.
Thank the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for actually reminding me of the very pleasant day we spent there together with other members. A very strategic and interesting tourism product for the country. The day we were there, the Department of Tourism, the director, was there with her team, and she interacted and has since followed up with support, the offering of brochures and marketing support. I will endeavor to ask the director for an update on that and supply it to the member as well. Do you have another supplementary? Do you have another question?
The member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the exception of Pedro St. James, is there any thought being given to any other attractions in the Newlands and Savannah area?
Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will take a couple of minutes to talk about what I believe is an extremely important attraction for the Eastern District, Baden Town, North Side, East End. The identification of a children's garden at the Botanical Park is a destination tourism initiative. And what this does, the $1.2 million is not going to be a $1.2 million capital investment from government. It's going to be a partnership with private individuals as well. But in looking at the offering and the importance of this project itself, I give you the example of an ongoing area where young people who are visiting the island can come and enjoy. But they won't come by themselves, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they'll come with their grandparents, their parents, and their brothers and sisters. And when they get there, they're not only going to enjoy, and I'll list out the items, they're going to enjoy the youth of this island who will be there as well. And history shows us, Mr. Speaker, in a project like this, that this creates repeat business. It breaks down boundaries between the visitors and us, the Caymanian people. It creates friendships that are generational lasting. And the idea of putting this in that very strategic catchment area between 3 districts that will service that area and add to the tourism product, I think is limitless to what it actually has to offer from the product. Mr. Speaker, the project has an outdoor classroom. It has a whole garden landscape, including the mounds and plants and trees. The site works is included in the clearing and filling, a play zone observation tower, shaded areas for rest, discovery pond, environmental zone, viewing of birds, bugs, lizards area, butterfly house, bamboo avenue area, a kids splash zone, a tunnel run, the accompanying landscape, whole garden perimeter fencing, a grow zone, signs and maps, entryway and gazebo, natural trees, railway sleeper boxes, sensory garden area, cobblestone surface, play zone surface, event lawn, storage shed, giant flower display area, and grow zone perimeter landscaping. Mr. Speaker, I think this is a very strategic way forward. I think it's going to be a tremendous benefit to the eastern districts of the island. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister for that answer and the effort being made. Mr. Speaker, we have the only two functioning district councils in the country, or in Northside and Bordentown, Newlands, although not legitimized yet by the government, but semblance of a district council anyway. I wonder if the Minister would be open to taking input from these two bodies, because they are representative of the constituencies with regard to what can be done to develop tourism in those constituencies and surrounding areas. And if he would undertake to give me some sort of a timeline that we can work with to make representations on behalf of those constituencies.
The Honorable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me mention that the minister that is here, that is from the Bordentown area, brings us a lot of information from the different districts in the eastern districts, along with other areas of Cayman, and has also been supportive of the initiatives that we have. I believe that we have proven that anything that you bring that is good for tourism, we are very interested in how we can work to make that happen.
Member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the Minister can tell us, for my own edification, the wreck of the tent sales signage, and I see he has renamed it to Welcome Comfort Center. Wow. The new deadline is June. Was it not intended for that to be December to coincide with the awards on Heroes Day to be, or January, because of it being seamen? And I was working on that basis all along.
Mr. Speaker, the member from East End is very well aware of the progress that we have tried to go forward with this. I believe that he has been involved with the plans that were drawn, were shared with him, the timing of when they went to planning, and he is correct. They're budgeted for in this budget, and we have made every effort to try to have it ready. But I don't think it would be realistic for me to bring the answer to this question and say to you, although we have tried, and you have tried with us, and we appreciate the help and the input that you've given on the different visits there, but it's simply not going to be ready for December 2018.
The member for East End.
Mr. Speaker, I understand that. I have been involved there, but I thought we would have been able to get it by January Heroes Day, which was the original intent. I do know it only last week it went out to tenders or something like that. So but it's a small building, really. Mr. Speaker, on a different note, I wonder if the minister can, on the matter of tourism in the eastern districts, there has been a number of the docks, the launch ramp docks, being used for tourism purposes. And I believe the Minister for Works would know something about this as well. But it appears like the docks are being used outside of the agreement that was made with the operators who use those docks. Can the Minister assure me that he will look into it and correct those matters, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for the question. He is correct, and he brought it to my attention 7, 8 months ago. The issue was, right. And we reviewed it at that time. I gave him the commitment that I'll look into it again and get the information that's available for it and understand that the issue is there.
The elected member for Georgetown Central to ask the Honourable Deputy Governor, ex officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service, question number 34.
The member for Georgetown Central, question number 34.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the question standing in my name, question number 34 on the order paper. Can the Honourable Deputy Governor say how was the 5% determined in the cost of living increase for civil servants?
The Honourable Deputy Governor.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, the cost of living adjustments, or COLA, refers to adjustments that are made to the salary scale of the civil service to offset the effects of inflation over a period of time. The assessment is performed by the Economic and Statistics Office, ESO, who measure changes in the Consumer Price Index within the Cayman Islands. For consistency, the civil service uses the mid-year or June CPI to assess the impact of annual inflation. Historically, Mr. Speaker, COLA was awarded routinely with adjustments made at least every 2 years. However, in 2010, when the full impact of the global recession was being felt locally, the civil service had to tighten its belt and to adopt certain austerity measures. One of these measures was a salary cut of 3.2%, which reversed the cost of living adjustment linked to the rise in the Consumer Price Index of 2007. This salary cut was in place for 5 years, during which time there were no adjustments to counter the cumulative effect of inflation between 2007 to 2015. While these measures were difficult, they were part of many decisive decisions that had been taken to shore up the Cayman Islands economy and to enable the government to cease running an operational deficit and to achieve a robust financial position where it yields healthy annual surpluses. As the financial situation improved, the government has been diligent in rewarding civil servants for their productivity gains. With respect to COLA, this has met an increase of 4% awarded in 2015, followed by an increase of 5% awarded this year, to bridge the gap that has been created. Also, when the government announced the COLA this year, it committed to reassessing again in 2 years, with the next COLA assessment being due in 2020. With the median salary in the civil service being CI $46,575 annually, the 5% COLA equates to $194 per month for the average civil servant increase. For many civil servants, this means they are better able to fund monthly expenses such as a house mortgage, with prime interest rates increasing from 3.5% in December 2015 to 5% in June 2018. A mortgage payment on a $200,000 loan over 25 years means an increase in payments from $1,001 to $1,169, a difference of $168. Simply put, Mr. Speaker, the increases in our food costs, our mortgage rates, our utilities have moved on, while our salary ranges had not. Bridging this gap has been a deliberate strategy to facilitate staff retention and to enable the civil service to effectively compete to attract the top talent. The 5% is based not only on the impact to salaries, but in consideration of the hard work and dedication exhibited by civil servants each day. Mr. Speaker, we cannot forget the lessons of our past. Future awards of COLA will be determined by two key factors. The first being an assessment of the consumer price index movements over the period. The second factor is equally important, namely the fiscal position of the government. We must always strike a balance to ensure that we are responsible in our approach and that the measures we adopt are sustainable. I want to thank the government for the decisive steps it has taken to close the gap that existed in our earnings as compared to inflation, and for their commitment to making the next assessment in 2020. This demonstrates responsible stewardship and our commitment to being a good employer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Honorable Deputy Governor say with confidence now that all civil servants are up to par with the cost of living that they haven't been getting over the last 10 and odd years? It's just because we've heard, and the reason why I asked the question, Mr. Speaker, we've heard I've heard many civil servants say that there's different years they didn't get, or they skipped this year and they skipped that year. I just want to know that we can confidently say we're up to par now where they should be in respect to the cost of living and respect to their salaries, that can help me with my follow-up question after that.
The Honorable Deputy Governor.
Mr. Speaker, we have not caught up with the CPI. But that is the reason why the government has committed to do another COLA in 2020. So, Mr. Speaker, just to say that we wanted to give a number that was going to be meaningful to civil servants. We didn't give 2.5% or 3%. The government was, I think, very responsible and did the appropriate thing in awarding a 5%. That means that, and I gave the example of the mortgages, that even a civil servant who has had a mortgage, their COLA adjustment will allow them to meet the new payments and have a bit left over. So we wanted to give something that was substantial, it was meaningful to civil servants, but we also had to be mindful that we had to keep money in the bank for that rainy day. So we couldn't give the full amount that we needed to do at this time, but again, the government has committed to review it again in 2020.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Deputy Governor say if he's aware if there is an increase of the CPI between now and 2020, will the outstanding backup along with if there is an increase in the CPI be considered both within that assessment at that time if the government is in the financial position to do so?
The Honorable Deputy Governor.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we will present to the government where we are with the CPI, including this year and how far we are behind. So the government will get the full picture and be able to make a informed decision. There's been nobody saying that civil servants doesn't deserve this. What we're saying is it has to be done in a responsible manner, and I think everyone accepts that, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I agree with the sentiments by the Deputy Governor. Those questions are going to get to this now last question here, which is there a guideline or a policy on our schedule that we examine this every year or every 2 years? And if there is one, what is it?
Honorable the Deputy Governor.
Sorry. Mr. Speaker, as I said in my substantive answer, the previous policy was every 2 years. That had been halted because of the global financial crisis. But I do believe now we're back on track to reviewing the COLA every 2 years, and that's the commitment that the government has given.
The member for Georgetown Central, last supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Deputy Governor say if he's aware that the formula that is used by the Economics and Statistics Office to determine the percentage is also afforded to the authorities in the country in respect for them to determine their request for a cost of living approval by the Cabinet? And the reason, Mr. Speaker, is because some authorities who've applied have been asked to present their reasoning behind why they are applying for it and what formula upon which they use. So I just want to know whether the Economics and Statistics Office, which obviously have specialists in that office to determine these percentages and these numbers, those expertise has been awarded to the authorities to determine that as well, to help them with their applications to justify their want or need for an increase.
Honorable the Deputy Governor.
Mr. Speaker, yes, that information is available. It's actually public knowledge. So yes, they would have that information in putting forward their request to Cabinet.
Item 7.
Statements by the Honourable Ministers and members of the Cabinet.
I have received a statement from the Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the coalition government, it heartens me to deliver this statement to the Honourable House regarding achievements in education since January of this year. I'm quite excited about a number of achievements, and I'm indeed grateful for this Honourable House and for the commitment that is given to education. Mr. Speaker, We are all well aware that education does not happen without support and resources. There are many systems and processes that happen behind the scenes that allow the staff to do their job of teaching and the children to do their job of learning. One such behind-the-scenes development is technology, which improves the work supporting education. DocuWare software has been implemented to improve the efficiency of the processing of the work orders from our schools. This is to be extended to the registration of students, transcript applications, invoicing for outsourced contractors, and application for use of our various facilities. Mr. Speaker, this is an ongoing process to improve and to modernize our current mode of operations for improved customer services and transition to more paperless state. The Education Department is continuing collaborative work with DES units and principals to increase their inputs in the budget process, ensuring that each principal has more of a say in requests made specifically for their respective schools to address the needs of their own unique population. Staff enhancement. Mr. Speaker, as this Honourable House was informed in the first session, there has been an increase in teachers' salaries. We know how important teachers are to the lives of our children and the future of our beloved country. This planned increase in salary, with a further increase in September 2020, will find no teacher employed in the Cayman Islands government system earning less than 5,000 CI per month. This increase will be a component in facilitating retention of staff who make a positive contribution to the lives of our children and the atmosphere of our schools. Mr. Speaker, will also help to make the vocation more appealing to our Caymanians and to give the country a stronger standing when advertising positions in a competitive market. In keeping with this commitment to educators in our classroom, there's been a commitment to also review the salaries of other staff, including but not limited to senior management staff in our schools. Mr. Speaker, we have also taken steps to strengthen the leadership in our schools. One important step is that now all schools have at least one non-teaching deputy principal. With the current senior management structure in place, monitoring and support of effective teaching and in turn student progress in all of our schools can be enhanced. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, a new and much needed facility is in the works for the secondary education in Georgetown. There have been further progress towards the construction of the much anticipated John Gray High School. This facility will serve the people of this country well. In fact, as we speak, Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands Classic Basketball Tournament is being hosted in the completed John Gray High School Gymnasium completed by the previous administration. In order to ensure that the facility is managed and that there is an active person on the ground, Mr. Speaker, a facilities superintendent was appointed specifically for the new John Gray Gymnasium. Mr. Speaker, our education system caters to children of varying abilities and needs. To ensure that we offer the very best service possible to all of our children, there has been a number of additions and initiatives over this last year. For example, all primary school special education needs coordinators have now been certified reading recovery teachers. They are now able to provide this intervention for younger learners who find themselves having extreme difficulty with early reading. These staff members, Mr. Speaker, are now specially trained to work individually with students at the required intensity and duration. Research of this program promises that about 75% of these children who receive this intervention achieve grade level standard. I am sure we can all agree the importance of this certification for the staff. I'm also sure, Mr. Speaker, that we will remember the support I received with additional posts for our children with special educational needs. The recruitment for these posts are ongoing, and some already haven't been assigned to our children. I am positive that these posts will go a long way in improving the access to education for our children with special education needs. All staff in our education system are important, and all staff have impact on our children's experience at school. Considering the research surrounding professional development and effect-sized teacher-assistant training is being facilitated over a period of 10 weeks and includes opportunities for the participants to gain new knowledge and skills, collaborate with each other, reflection on their experiences, and learning and tap into resources of efficacy. The sessions are of 2 hours long, Mr. Speaker, commencing at 2:15 p.m. until 4:15 p.m. in the afternoons. And we have had a very positive feedback from participants and principals alike. There are currently 24 participants from various primary schools. The participants will complete sessions on a variety of topics, including promoting and supporting positive behavior, supporting inclusion and literacy, ICT, and numeracy in the classroom. Even though this cohort has only had a few sessions, they have already requested part 2 of the training, which may be delivered using an online service through the Commonwealth Trust. These support staff, Mr. Speaker, are well on their way to adding to their already valuable contributions to our children's learning. In addition to other planned staff development, there were specific opportunities for primary specialists to aid in the development of common schemes of work. This work will help to further the assurance of the children in all of our government primary schools, and they are receiving a consistent education across these said schools. Their knowledge and skills are taught in a sequence which will allow them, Mr. Speaker, to build on past knowledge. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to end this segment of my statement with the good news that there has been an increase in Caymanian appointments at the beginning of this school year. To our cadre of personnel, there has been added 1 Caymanian principal, 1 seconded Caymanian deputy principal, and 3 newly qualified Caymanian teachers. As mentioned previously, we hope to attract more Caymanians to the teaching profession. I feel that these appointments demonstrate that Caymanians are still interested in this noble profession and indeed have room to grow within our system. We wish each appointee the very best of everything as they're developed in their careers and make positive impacts in our education system. Mr. Speaker, just as we in the Ministry and Department of Education endeavor to improve education, we also acknowledge the hard work of the staff interacting with our children each and every day. Programs and support. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of programs and supports in place for our children. The Literacy Response to Intervention, or the RTI, is one such important support program. This has made considerable impact on literacy achievement of our students needing additional support since its inception in 2015. As of June 2018, Mr. Speaker, approximately 84% of students enrolled in the level literacy intervention at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 were recorded as having made progress on an average of half a year to 1 year's growth. Similarly, at Key Stage 3, approximately 7 to 9% of the students made a quarter of a year to a half year's growth during the 6 months intervention cycle. During 2017-2018 school year, 100% of the 89 students selected out of a cohort of 402 Year 2 students recorded growth in their literacy learning. Mr. Speaker, most students with a completed series of lessons, the growth was outstanding, with 88% of students making substantial to accelerated progress and 12% making limited progress. The literacy RTI has yielded more noteworthy results in spite of the framework being in its fledgling stages. Mr. Speaker, with improved consistency in school-based management of the RTI framework and improved fidelity in the administration of interventions, the literacy RTI is projected to yield even greater results. The maths recovery intervention commenced in year 3 as well, thus expanding the number of students who will be able to benefit from this said intervention. The Shining Stars Key Stage 1 unit was established to cater to students in the younger age group who require more therapeutic intervention. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore anticipated that this unit will help our children from a younger age to self-regulate, learn metacognitive skills, and be more prepared for learning and social interaction when they return to the regular catchment area schools. We look forward to celebrating the success stories that will come from this specialized unit. As you know, Mr. Speaker, the National Science Educational Strategy has also been developed and is now beginning phases of implementation. This strategy is quite important as it will help to highlight science in our education system and indeed the wider community. The strategy consists of 3 goals, which will guide all leaders and teachers in ensuring improvement in the provision of science education. Careers related to science are on the rise. This strategy will help to ensure also that our children are best prepared for these future career options. While our children are in our care and in our schools, we must do our best to ensure that they not only learn, Mr. Speaker, but indeed that they are kept safe. The Business Services Unit, supported by the Child Protection, training for some 450 third-party contracted employees, began in March and continued until this month. This was a massive undertaking, Mr. Speaker, but it demonstrates the commitment of the coalition government to the future of education and our children in general. Support for all of our children is most evident when we can have achievements such as those of the group of 7 students from our Lighthouse School who were successful in obtaining Level 1 in City and Guilds. This is a historic accomplishment, Mr. Speaker. These students are now attending the Cayman Islands Further Education Center, or CIFEC, along with their peers, and from all reports, they are doing extremely well and are a wonderful addition to the life of the school. When we can celebrate accomplishments such as these, Mr. Speaker, by the most vulnerable learners in our education system, we can rest assured that the hard work of all involved is paying off. We will continue to follow up on these students, Mr. Speaker, and we'll celebrate with them as they continue to grow from strength to strength. Mr. Speaker, to continue on regarding the Lighthouse School, which is not only a beacon to the children and families they serve, but is now also proven to be a leading force in our system. The pivot system, which is used to monitor progress and plan forward each student, has become further embedded. Training was completed by all staff at the Lighthouse School on this progress monitoring tool. All staff can now use the pivots to compare the progress of their students with other special education needs internationally. This program then, Mr. Speaker, gives the Lighthouse School a consistent framework to monitor the progress of our children, and it is a clear pathway when planning the future stages for these students. I trust that members of this Honourable House, Mr. Speaker, will join me in commending the leaders, the staff, and the students of the Lighthouse School on lighting the way for persons with special needs in our country. Mr. Speaker, Cayman Brac has also been involved in this progress as it relates to special needs provision. The Beacon Learning Centre has been established now to fill the gap in service of the provision for children who require a more intense and specialized program that could be provided in our mainstream schools on Cayman Brac. This newly established service is catering to the needs of a number of reception and primary school aged children, and improvements in the children's overall development is already being reported. Mr. Speaker, in closing, Please allow me to extend my sincere appreciation to the coalition government for supporting my education team and enabling us to make a positive contribution in the lives of all of our children and for those who serve them tirelessly every day. I trust that we will all continue to make our children a priority as we build together a stronger and better Cayman Islands. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Personal explanations.
None.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
Honorable members, I have received word of the passing of the son-in-law of former Speaker, Mrs. Mary Lawrence, son-in-law who resides in Tampa. We want to extend our condolences to the former Speaker and her family.
Raising a matter of privileges.
None.
Government business, bills. First reading, the supplementary appropriation, January 2018 to December 2018, Bill 2018.
The Honorable Minister of Finance. The bill has been read a first time. And sat down for the second reading. I always think that goes without saying, but.
Second readings, the Customs and Border Control Bill 2018.
The Honorable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move a bill for a law to establish the Customs and Border Control Service, to repeal the Customs Law 2017 revision, to repeal Parts 6, 7, and 8 of the Immigration Law 2015 revision, and for incidental and connected purposes.
The bill has been duly moved. The Honorable Premier going to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your indulgence and that of members while I sought to find my speaking notes. Mr. Speaker, as I have already discussed the government's broader policy shift as it relates to border control and migration management, the introduction of the Customs and Border Control Bill 2018 is in furtherance of those aims. As part of the government's commitment to strengthening our national security framework as it relates to border protection and public safety, the Customs Department is being merged with the border control elements of the Department of Immigration into a single new entity called the Customs and Border Control Service. The merger will take effect on 1st January 2019. Mr. Speaker, the merger of our two primary border control agencies into a single Customs and Border Control Service will create the platform to, among other things, more effectively continue the border control transition from the traditional gatekeepers approach to an intelligence-led risk management strategic approach at our borders, achieve greater operational efficiencies by utilizing advanced technology and smarter staff deployment, more efficiently facilitate legitimate trade and low-risk passengers while simultaneously more robustly confronting national security threats such as drugs and firearms, prepare for a single checkpoint at the border for the majority of passengers and goods, while at the same time establishing a more robust secondary examination environment for those high-risk passengers and goods. And finally, Mr. Speaker, ultimately increasing our detection rate and revenue collection. The Customs and Border Control Bill establishes the Customs and Border Control Service as a statutory body. Essentially, the bill joins the customs law in its entirety with parts of the immigration law relating to entry and landing, visas, asylum, and matters relating to deportation. Some key points of the bill are as follows. The bill provides for the Director of Customs and Border Control to assume the responsibilities, powers, and functions previously vested in the Collector of Customs. It provides for the Director of Customs and Border Control to assume the responsibilities, powers, and functions previously vested in the Chief Immigration Officer as it relates to matters concerning entry and landing. It provides for an integrated border security service. It harmonizes references to customs officers and immigration officers as necessary to allow the delivery of the organization's integrated remit. It creates the ability for Customs and Border Control, the service, for the Customs and Border Control Service as the organization with responsibility for border management to take decisions relating to granting or refusal of permission to enter the islands, and it specifies arrangements for appeals against decisions of border control officers. Mr. Speaker, although this bill will officially establish the new Customs and Border Control Service on the 1st of January 2019, there remains a lot of work to be done after that date to complete the full merger and re-engineer our border control business processes. The merger is therefore a multi-year project, as it has been in other countries that have undertaken this exercise. With a bill of this size, Mr. Speaker, it is inevitable that mistakes will be made and matters overlooked. Further amendments will be required to this law in due course to address issues that have come to light since the bill was tabled. Once One issue that has already been identified is the need to provide the power for border control officers to impose fines administratively in lieu of court proceedings for offenses relating to overstaying and illegal landing. Mr. Speaker, the government has received technical advice and guidance from our border control colleagues in the United Kingdom and the United States, and we are most grateful for that. While Cayman is a much smaller jurisdiction, many of the considerations associated with a merger of this nature are similar from country to country. The difference, Mr. Speaker, is simply one of scale. As one would expect, there's a tremendous amount of training and cross-training that must be undertaken by this new agency in order to incrementally and efficiently bring about the changes that are envisioned for what will ultimately be a world-class border control service. Mr. Speaker, the acquisition and use of the right technology is also key to accelerating and completing this transition to an intelligence-led risk management strategic approach. An important consideration in that regard is the rapid pace at which the technology is advancing. Government must be careful not to invest in technology that cannot be enhanced efficiently because it will become obsolete very quickly. Mr. Speaker, there has been a tremendous amount of regional interest in this merger, and I have every confidence that many other Caribbean countries will seek to emulate the Cayman project. I am aware, Mr. Speaker, that the Honorable Leader of the Opposition has raised some concerns in the local media concerning the merger of our Customs and Immigration Departments into a single Customs and Border Control Service. And I wish to address them at this point because the government does not believe that his concerns are valid. Mr. Speaker, two primary concerns were raised in the local media by the Honorable Leader of the Opposition. The first was with respect to the revenue collected by the existing Customs Department and his belief that this should not be left to the new Customs and Border Control Service because it is a law enforcement agency and it should not be collecting revenue. My first observation on that, Mr. Speaker, is that the existing Customs Department is also a law enforcement agency and is in fact also one of the primary revenue collection agencies of the Cayman Islands government and has been so since its inception. The department has very ably executed these dual roles over decades, and we expect that this will continue under the Customs and Border Control Service. Mr. Speaker, my second observation on this issue is that the government did in fact consider whether we should separate the revenue collection aspect of the existing customs operations from the Customs and Border Control Service. We took advice from the Customs Department and others and decided not to separate these functions for the following reasons. The majority of what we consume in Cayman is imported in packages, parcels, and containers. Each import presents the opportunity for some form of threat to our national security and the evasion or attempted evasion of import duty. During the process of collecting import duty, the Customs Department employs a number of strategies and practices, including the examination of documents to identify high-risk imports in order to select them for secondary examination. And the revenue collection and border control functions with respect to imports are so closely connected and integrated in terms of processing that to separate them would inadvertently create a gap in our national border control strategies. If the functions were separated, with different agencies being responsible for each one of them, once import duty is paid, a high-risk import could be released to the importer prematurely before it is inspected by Customs and Border Control. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, this separation of functions was originally done when the United Kingdom executed a similar merger, and they have also advised us that the separation was a huge mistake, and they would not recommend that we do so. Mr. Speaker, the second concern raised by the Leader of the Opposition was that the merger would undermine the successes already being realized in the early stage of the transition from the traditional gatekeepers approach to the intelligence-led risk management approach. Mr. Speaker, the government, the Customs Department, and the Department of Immigration are very confident that not only is this concern invalid, but that the merger will in fact have the opposite effect and will provide a more solid foundation for the new intelligence-led risk management approach to border control. Mr. Speaker, when you consider that we are merging all of the border control functions of these two agencies, including their existing intelligence units, you begin to appreciate that this merger, coupled with focused intelligence and risk management training and the opportunity for smarter staff deployment, will create the platform for more effective border control in these beloved islands of ours. Mr. Speaker, I hope that what I have said gives the Leader of the Opposition the comfort he needs for his side of this Honorable House to support the Customs and Border Control Bill. Mr. Speaker and honorable members will appreciate that the scale, scope, and complexity of national security is transforming. The Customs and Border Control Bill, Mr. Speaker, will further support the government in providing the public with a modernized border security framework to manage inherent security risks and to improve national security. Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill to the House and thank all parties involved in bringing these bills, this one and the one that has gone before and the one which is to come, as a package which will help the government in achieving its vision of a modernized border protection strategy.
Any other member wish to speak? The member from East End.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you. Just give me a chance to make me get there. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a contribution to this, the bill, which is, its objective is to merge the customs and part of the immigration departments into a new regime to control the borders of the country. Mr. Speaker, I believe I should start by saying that, again, I have, over the years, advocated for amalgamation of some things so we can bring them into greater focus and concentration on the objectives of those different entities. Mr. Speaker, but I should also say that this is a case where we are venturing in to new jurisdiction. And we all know that when we venture into something new, it takes a while to get it to the point where we envision. Mr. Speaker, I believe the vision has been around for a while. The government is now bringing that vision into focus. Anyone can have a vision. It's a matter of getting the job done and getting it done and making sure that vision becomes a reality, comes to fruition through action. I am not very good on compliments. I believe that if you're paid to do the job, you get the job done or get out. That's my view. So if the Premier is looking for compliments for his people and himself, then yeah, I guess a little bit. They are deserving. They are deserving. But he's been there 5 years too. I'm putting my caveat on it. Anyway, yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are a couple of things I want to address in it that I see is has fallen short of what my expectations for the bill was or is. Mr. Speaker, I know we copied and paste a lot of the immigration law and just brought it over, which is fine with a few minor changes. But again, I thought that maybe this was a perfect opportunity for us to capture some of the other things that is necessary for the proper implementation of this new entity, this new, I don't know if I can call it a new creature, but a new entity that we are and will be extremely dependent upon. Because for too long we have proffered different positions on how our borders should be protected. Mr. Speaker, we have made numerous complaints about the lack thereof over many years. To that end, Mr. Speaker, as a member of cabinet, I was the one who went farthest with the Coast Guard and the creation of the Coast Guard, which we had envisioned then and started with the helicopter and the boats. And my good friend, the Collector of Customs, and member from Savannah, and the Premier, and the now departed first elected member from Georgetown. Departed from amongst us, and may he go far. No, that's departed from this legislature, from being in a part of cabinet or anything of that nature. The number of the amount of criticisms we took for that. And today, we hear the public giving such kudos because of the abilities of that helicopter and what it now means, not only to the security, but to the inter-island emergency lifts and the likes. And Mr. Speaker, maybe we had deserved those criticisms because, to some extent, but not all of it, because we allowed someone else to determine what type of helicopter we get, and we had extreme expenditures at that time to get it up to scratch. And having said that, I believe I should also put a marker down now that the government has indicated that their intent is to buy another helicopter. And I want the government and the country to know that I am going to unconditionally support that proposal. But the condition is that the two must be available. And Mr. Speaker, there is a caveat on my support, and that is that it must be brand new. We cannot go through the same hiccups we had with this one to get it up to scratch. It must be brand new. And my understanding, without having any real knowledge of cost of helicopters, it's somewhere between $8 and $10 million. Mr. Speaker, when we did the boats and the helicopter between 2005 and 2009, my constant response to those who criticized me was, please give me the cost of one life. One resident life. Just give me a cost on that. But nobody could come up with a figure for that. And they never will, Mr. Speaker. So, if the $10 million is brought here for approval to purchase a new helicopter, then I'm all in on that. I will, and when I give my commitment, I give it. Mr. Speaker, I also understand now they have boats that have been repaired and the likes. And I'll touch on that because it is also an integral part of this border control that I have my concerns with this, that it is not represented in this bill. When I saw the announcement that there were two announcements made at the simultaneously. The one with the Charles Clifford being head of the border control, and the young man from Bordentown, Scotland, being head of the Coast Guard. I immediately had hopes that I had lived long enough to see two senior young Caymanians, well, that's all relative when it comes to the one that was minister, but young. But I immediately had hopes, I guess it's of grandeur, that all of a sudden we got two young Caymanians who is going to be responsible for that coordination of protecting this country at long last. Only to have one of the greatest disappointments of my life when I learned that the Coast Guard is still going to be controlled by virtue of Section 55 of the Constitution. That sort of took something away from it, but I immediately, I tried to get back and get some positive thoughts in my head again subsequent to that. And I believe I have reached the point where I want to give it that opportunity to succeed, because I guess I haven't worked with one of those gentlemen and the other one I know from family and friends and watching him. I have a lot of confidence in these two individuals that this is going to work. However, I know it's going to take a while, and it's going to be important for us, all of us, not this honorable house, this entire country, to give those two new agencies, these two new regimes, the opportunity to work. Because we have to manage expectations, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, if you could take a break there. I will suspend proceedings until 2:15.